I'm live. It says, hello, hello, hello to whoever is here. And I won't know who's here unless you put something in the comment section. So it'll take a minute or two for a couple of other people to get in here so we can get a good chat going like we normally do. But the topic tonight is going to be tips and tricks on buying an older van, a used van, some type of camper van to use for van life, whether it's a minivan or cargo van or one of these professional class B type vans or whatever. I have to change chairs eventually. I don't like this one. Anyway, a few more people should stumble in here in a moment. So in the meantime, those of you that are already in here, if you have a question about buying a van, a used van, which is what most of us end up doing when we're starting out on van life or weekend adventures or whatever it is, go ahead and put those questions in the comment section. Real quick, I did a video the other day kind of on these same topics. The next video coming up is going to be, I'm going to take you out with a van and show you exactly what I take, because I actually show up with items. And one of those is an engine code reader that you'll find down in the description. But there's other items I take with me also, and I'm going to show you exactly what I do and exactly what I check when I'm out shopping for a van or any other vehicle, because I was doing this long before I got into van life. I had to buy a lot of vehicles for work. I was constantly flipping hobby cars, sports cars, and trusting mechanics, even trusting dealerships. And I'm not knocking dealerships. So if anybody's, before anybody starts on me, I am certainly not anti-dealership. But people put a whole lot of faith into what dealerships are doing with used vehicles, and way more than they should. And they think the dealership is often doing way more than it is before they set that vehicle on a lot. So even the ones that I have bought from dealerships, I have taken out, I have thoroughly tested, I have done exactly the same things. I was doing these things 15 and 20 years ago, buying vehicles, going and testing all of this stuff. Dealership. Yeah, some unfortunately are. There are good dealerships. They're hard to find, though. I bought 3 used vehicles in a row from a dealership in Virginia that was about 2 hours, 2.5 hours away from me. Excellent service, great sales guy, great staff, nice people that work there. And as a matter of fact, I didn't trade in. I stopped and bought a vehicle in the winter time. I bought another SUV because I was having such trouble in January being trapped in a snowstorm in a sports car. So I just stopped, bought a vehicle again from them, and left my car there. And a couple of days later, I get a phone call. They had rolled, their new vehicles came in, and they rolled a truck off the car hauler and took out the side of my car. So I went up there a few weeks later, and they're like, they kept apologizing. We'll fix it. We'll buy it from you, whatever it was. And I just said, fix it. Took the side out of it. They fixed it. They fixed everything back, did a tremendous job. Fixed a couple other little spots I had that wasn't even caused by them, and they knew it. Put it on a car hauler and brought it to me in the town I lived in. Unfortunately, not too long after that dealership sold out to a dealership chain, and I walked in and it was all new people. My sales guy was retired. All the people I dealt with at the dealership were gone. And I talked to the first guy about a vehicle, and it was obvious that, everything had changed. There was going to be no deals. There was going to be no anything. So That's something to keep in mind also when you're dealing with any kind of business. And something I found out over the years, sometimes as customers, we stay way too loyal to a business. Once that business stops being loyal to us, or that business changes hands, changes ownership, sells out, whatever the case may be. But now we've got a few people in here, see a few comments, let you people, boys and girls, hit me with any questions you might have. Just listening. Talk to text isn't working well. Okay. Well, I hope you're having a good weekend, Tina. What are your thoughts on an all-wheel drive Sienna? An all-wheel drive anything is fine. Minivans are going to sit fairly low. It certainly can't hurt to have all-wheel drive, but you're going to pay for it. You're going to lose about a mile a gallon in gas mileage when you have all-wheel drive, and you're going to have a little more maintenance to do because the system's a little more complicated. So it's going to be a little more expensive when you do have to have things done with an all-wheel drive type system. When I started this, I started with a two-wheel drive minivan because I couldn't find one that was all-wheel drive in good shape. And I wanted to get started, and I thought, hey, I'll buy this first van. I'll use it for a couple months until I find a better deal. And I ended up out west and in canyons and everywhere, and I never had any problems. My fears of getting stuck were pretty unfounded, as long as you're careful and use some common sense. My thing with having all-wheel drive, the longer I thought about it and the more experience that I got doing this and traveling into different places, is having all-wheel drive or a four-wheel drive system probably would have caused me to go further back into places and get stuck, because I would have been more likely to take risk that I shouldn't take by putting that extra confidence into having all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. But with that said, there's certainly nothing wrong with it. And, there's a lot of you guys and gals that you may live in the Northeast or whatever, to where just in the wintertime, having an all-wheel drive system is going to be very beneficial to you to have. Now, I had 3 SUVs in a row that were Oldsmobile SUVs that were all-wheel drive, which essentially were Chevy Blazers at that time, just with all the nicety upgrades. And, for wintertime, we don't get a lot of snow in the area, Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, where I am, but it certainly did come in handy that once a year that we did end up with a 6-inch snow or something. So, again, it just depends on your style of traveling, whether that's something you need to go to or not. But I wouldn't let it keep me from buying a van unless I knew I was going to spend a lot of winter time in snowy areas. So yeah, all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, it's going to let you go further back into places. But again, you have to use your judgment. And getting stuck in the middle of nowhere is no fun. And it can get really expensive, which is a topic for a whole other video that I have coming up, because all of these travel plans, whatever it is that you have, a lot of people think that means these people are going to come get you and your travel plan is going to pay for it. And if you end up 6 or 7 miles off the beaten path, which is very easy to do again if you're in the West, you're going to be in for some sticker shock. You're going to be in for some surprises. You're going to find out real fast about the clause in there that once you leave the main road, basically, they don't have to come get you. Or there's going to be a limit on what they're going to pay a tow company. And what those tow companies are going to charge, especially if you have an RV or you have a larger, heavier vehicle, and you go get that thing stuck, you can end up with a $500 to $1,000 bill for somebody to come get you and yank you out and move your vehicle 6 feet. Because these guys, first of all, the company they're contracted to, they may end up being an hour and a half or 2 hours away from where you are. And if they're charging, and this is not uncommon for these companies to be charging $200 or $250 an hour, they're going to charge you driving time both ways. It may only take them 5 minutes to jerk your vehicle out and get it unstuck, but you're going to be paying 3 or 4 hours of driving time for them to get the right vehicle to you in order to do that. And you may have a plan that only pays $300 or $500 or whatever amount, and they're going to expect the rest from you in cash right there before they do anything. So you end up with an $800 bill and you've got a plan that pays $300 of it. It's going to cost you $500 to get unstuck. So that's the way those things really work. And it doesn't matter whether you have AAA. It doesn't matter whether you have Allstate. You don't have to be an Allstate customer. They have their own separate travel help plan that they sell, which is similar to AAA. The RV people, a lot of them use Sam's Club. And like I said, there's going to be a whole video on the pros and cons of this stuff coming up. But let's see what some of the other. The 2021 Sienna is very tempting. Yeah, I would personally love to have one. But again, when you're talking overlanding, when you're talking serious adventuring, this is one reason why I don't want a new or newer vehicle for what I do, because I am constantly going into places that I have never been before. Going down back roads where I have trees and branches bouncing off stuff and there's no place to turn around and there's the potential to get stuck and there's the potential to bottom out. And I have done all of these things, but because it's what I do. Now, everybody else may not travel that way. But, you know, those of you that subscribe to this channel know that I have 2 different vans I use at different times. And I have knocked a mirror completely off each van and had to replace it. So I have put a few scratches along the sides of both of them. And this next van that I have, the same thing is going to happen to, because it's not that I'm rough on them, but I take them places that you wouldn't want to take a shiny new vehicle. But again, the answer to that depends on your style of travel. Now, in 7 or 8 years, when the prices on those things come down, would I consider buying one? Yeah, absolutely. Because I think Toyota's has the best system out there, the best hybrid system by far. I laughed at Toyota Priuses until I drove a couple. And it's just an outstanding system. It's been out long enough. It's proven itself. And that's basically what they have in that same setup with a larger engine in that minivan. So, but your $38,000 roughly, you can get up into $50,000 or $55,000 if you go with the top end models like the platinum package and stuff. So they're a little bit of money, but for the right person, yeah, they're only starting in 2021. It's the hybrid setup only. That's the only way they come. When do I think it will be more of a buyer's market for new cars? Brandon, it will turn. As far as when, I don't know. I'm guessing 3 to 6 months. I think things are going to level out by the end of the year. How fast they level back out is anybody's question. There's just several things that have this out of whack. Everybody having their stimulus money got it out of whack. That Nomad Land movie, you can think what you want of it, but that got a lot of people interested in this stuff and caused a lot of people to jump and get into the van market. That caused a problem. And the last couple of months, you have the problem with the computer chips coming in with the vehicles. With the new vehicles, sales last month for new vehicles were down across the board. I think something like 27%. I've driven by new car dealerships, an hour away from me that literally have 10 new vehicles on the lot. That's it. they don't have anything to sell. And because the last couple of months of them not selling new vehicles to people, or as many new vehicles to people, of course, they've taken in less trade-ins, which has funneled all the way down through the used car, used van, whatever market. That's causing all of these problems right now. So it will straighten out, but it's going to take a little while. So right now it is kind of a seller's market, but there still are some deals out there. But you're going to get better deals again from private parties, which is one of the things I'll be talking about in an upcoming video, dealing with private people rather than dealerships. But not everybody realizes what's going on. So not everybody that's selling a vehicle, understands how out of whack these things are right now. So there's still some deals out there, but they're harder than to find than they were. See Tim in there, a bunch of people, Julie. Hello to everybody that's joined this. I generally don't sit there and read off names of everybody that comes into chat, because it really annoys me when I'm watching somebody else's chat and they're reading off 30 names, and every 2 words they're stopping to say hi to somebody. So I tend to not do that. So if you're in there, don't think I'm ignoring you. Yeah, the gas mileage on that Sienna is certainly nice also, because they're talking averaging 36 or something they're promising. So they may hit that, because it easily hits in the 40s, and depending on how you drive it, you can hit 50 out of average on a Prius pretty easy. So 36 is certainly not incomprehensible with a Sienna hybrid system, compared to minivans that, older minivans, you're probably going to be in the 18 to 20 range. Some of the newer ones are claiming to get up to 24 or so. Kevin doesn't love us. You all know I do. So here's a question for you guys and gals. What are you seeing when you drive by the car dealerships in your area? Because in our area, literally, they're pulling the stuff to the front and parking them. Instead of having them park this way, they're parking them this way, just to try to make that front row look full. And trucks, especially, trucks are non-existent. Ford has been blowing trucks out the back of the factory door, and they're still sitting on the lot. Chevrolet, with their full-size trucks, they're building them, rolling them on the trucks, sending them to dealers. The dealers are rolling them back off the trucks, and the things can't run because they don't have the right computer chips in them. So when the chips are finally available, they then are going to get sent to the dealers, and the dealers are going to be responsible for putting the chip in and programming it into these new vehicles. So it's just really odd right now, something we haven't seen before. And hopefully we'll never see again once this is over, because it's become annoying. And mixed in with that, you've got a steel shortage going on. For whatever reason, for whatever part of this you believe. When I was traveling a month and a half ago on that long trip, I ran into a lady in Arkansas, and we were talking, and for the last 6 months, her husband, I can't remember the name of the place, but it's something I had heard of before. It's one of the water heater manufacturers. And she said they're working most of the time 2 days a week, sometimes 3, but usually 2, because they can't get enough steel to build enough residential water heaters. So you have that going on. I know it's been a problem with the manufacturers of residential heat pumps. And there's a lot of shortages going on right now, which is in any of those markets is going to drive the prices up. The answer is buyer beware. I still see new cars up the yin yang in my area, but lives in Southern California. That's kind of odd, but then again, your stuff gets built, generally has a different, if it's going to California, it has a different computer in it. So maybe they had more of those already on hand in inventory. Maybe that's why you're not seeing the shortage in California. I don't know that. That's just a guess. But I know with a lot of vehicles, and like my older road trek, which was, is a Dodge full-size van, essentially, that was professionally modified. But if you go look at it, there were 3 computers made for that thing. There's one for the United States, except California. There's one for California, and there's one for Canada. So they're programmed slightly different because of emissions and what have you. So maybe that's why it's not a problem, as much of a problem in California as what the rest of the country is seeing. Used cars are full too. Hey, I don't know, but I know they're not here, and I know what Ford and General Motors have been doing with their trucks for the last month or so. Yeah, anytime somebody yells shortage, they can extort more money. That's a good way to look at it. Kathleen. So Kathleen's kind of in the Midwest. Yeah, scarce here, going for premium prices. Yeah. And I think the average selling price on a new vehicle is, I think I heard a few days ago, compared to a year ago, the average price is up like $1,700. And the other thing going on because of these shortages, for whatever reason that you want to give for the shortages on new vehicles, and the reason the prices are going up too, is all the manufacturers have done away with most of their rebates, or whatever rebates they have on new vehicles. They have cut them down drastically because with this shortage, they don't have to. So, for those of you that watch television and things, you watch your television ads, you're not seeing those $2,000 and $3,000 offers, rebates from the manufacturer right now to come in and buy a vehicle. So that's driving all the prices up on the new stuff also. And then you have that rolling downhill effect that happens all the way through the used vehicle market. Out of new and used cars in Alabama. Yeah. I was in a big city over the last week, though. Lots were empty there. I live in a very small city, a rural area. Yeah, so most of the country, but it's really interesting. It's really interesting that California's not as bad off in this. Lisa, I live in Ohio, and lots around are empty. Joe Miller, last year I had a hard time to find a full-size van because FedEx is buying every van they can get. Had to pay more on one, at least you have one. Yeah, so Joe, I assume you bought new when you bought, but yeah. And I was talking to a friend the other day that has nothing to do with van life, but dealing with vacation stuff. Now the the rental cars are all goofed up, and they have a shortage because at the beginning of this stuff that started, in March of 2020, shortly after that, Hertz bankrupted and went into protection, and it still exists, by the way, come out of it. But because you had all the flights and stuff being canceled, and the stuff at airports is such a large part of their business, all of the rental companies started selling vehicles off rather than what they knew was going to happen, letting these things just sit there and depreciate for 6 months, 12 months. Nobody knew how long quite stuff was going to go on before it got back to normal. So they're in a position now with the rental car market where they've sold off a large part of their fleet, and now that the flights and stuff have gotten back to normal, they don't have vehicles to buy. So there's just a lot of weird stuff going on. Get emails every week, seems, from local dealer wanting to trade in your van. Yeah. That's what, if you flip on the radio in my area, that's what every ad is a dealership telling you, if you have an extra vehicle sitting around, come give it to us and we'll give you an extra 10% or whatever. If you just have a vehicle that you're not using or don't use much or whatever. So they're all scrambling pretty good. Leslie, I traded in my SUV for a 2011 Odyssey. If I knew vans were so cool, I would have bought one years ago. I'll be taking my first solo trip for a few days next week. Well, Leslie, congratulations on that. And I had the same thought because I laughed at minivans and people with minivans until I decided to get into this, and I got the first one. And after I took the first really long trip in a minivan, I started thinking, the last 3 SUVs that I had just for travel before this, I think I would have been just as happier in a minivan. Over there, dealers are offering $500 above Kelly Blue Book. Yeah. Joe, 2015 model, FedEx couldn't get enough new ones, so we're buying used ones instead. Wow. See, I learned stuff too. I learned stuff from all of you. Julie, try to rent a minivan. Minivans are not available. A friend rented a U-Haul van. Yeah. And these rental cars that used to be, $29 a day and stuff. I had a friend that was telling me they got a quote on a week on a subcompact, and it was $900. And this was, you get the good rates when you're just driving it and you take it back to the same place that you got it from. You pay more when you're doing the one-way stuff. But that was just insane, because 2 years ago, you probably could have rented that same car for a week for $400. So now it's $900 instead of $400. And she chose not to do that, and they're making other arrangements for what they want to do. Looking for a used Class B or a conversion van. So high because of low inventory. Yeah. And on top of that, Samantha, you just always have supply and demand on Class B. So if you're looking at stuff like Pleasure Ways or Road Treks or whatever, those have always been high. Granted, they're even higher right now, what they're selling for. But if anybody came and knocked on my door and made me a ridiculous offer, I'd be more than happy to sell mine right now and then buy one back 6 months or a year from now. But the important thing is it will level out. It will go back to normal, but it's going to take a while. Plenty of people renting out built-out camper vans now too. Yeah, I have seen some of that, not in my area, but I have seen ads for that in other areas. High school rodeo finals are here in another week. The venue is begging for RVs to house participants on site. I don't know how I would feel about renting. Probably a little bit better with RVs, maybe. I just don't know how I would feel about renting vehicles out. I know there's people that do it. I know there's services I looked at something the other night, Turo or something, and so people put sports cars and minivans and Jeeps and different things on. But if I had a newer vehicle, I don't know that I would really want to do that, but to each their own. I know I've gotten stuff a few times years ago when I was traveling from the Dream Cars places. There's one on the Strip in Las Vegas. There's a few others around, and where you can rent some, everything from Hummers to a few exotic cars or whatever. And I know they had ways to monitor it, and it's like some of the Ferraris. It was basically if because they were manual transmissions. If you over rev this thing and you burn the tires, we automatically charge your credit card another $1,200 for a set of rear tires. So, with nicer stuff, people are going to want to play with it sometimes. So, our team will be bunking on their horse trailers just like we did when we traveled the circuit. Classic car. Just found this channel the other day and enjoy the content. Well, I appreciate that. I have some good stuff coming up too. I think you'll enjoy, or hopefully learn a thing or two from. Even if you know a lot, we're all still always learning and picking up little tips and things from each other. And when I go through that checklist and show you exactly what I do when I'm vehicle shopping, hopefully you and the others, even experienced people, will pick up a good tip or two. And let me give you an example of this. I threw a picture up in that last video, if you saw it, of the little blue sports car that I used to own. When I went and bought that car, I found it, and it was a 300ZX, early 90s. Those things are fairly rare. In 7 years, they only put, I think, 73,000 of those into the United States. They were really high rated by Car and Driver and these different magazines at the time they were made. And this one had a Stillen, which is a company name, body kit on it. It was just a very nice car. And it had an issue. It had a knock in the front end, which is why it was traded in. And I took it and I drove it and I did my little inspection thing with it. And I took it to 2 different places and had it put on racks. And I looked at it. They looked at it. They called other people over to look at it, and nobody could find the problem of what was causing the knock on this car. So I had decided I wasn't going to buy this car. And I also decided I was going to stop for lunch before I took the car back. Forgetting how low this car actually set with this body kit on it, which was literally about that far, about 4 inches off the ground. I used to have to drive around roadkill with this car rather than scoop it up. When I stopped for lunch, I got too close to the curb and I smacked the front end of this car on the concrete barrier. And I got out and looked at it, and now it had a little mark and a little crack in the fiberglass. So, unfortunately, my mama raised me right, and I knew I wasn't going to just be able to go back and hand them the keys. And I knew I was going to have to pay a fair amount of money to have that little fiberglass place repaired and that front end repainted. So I decided then to go back and negotiate on the car. So I called another friend at a garage and I said, hey, what's the worst case scenario if I have to have a whole new front end, everything put under this car? He gives it to me. I go back. I negotiated that off the price. I went ahead and bought the car. I drove the car back home with the little knock in the front end, immediately dropped it at my buddy's garage. Went back to where I was working at the time. 20 minutes later, the phone rings. The guy calls me. He says, your car's fixed. Come get it. I said, what do you mean it's fixed? He said, there was a bolt loose. You owe me $20 and come get your car. So I made out really well on that vehicle. But again, I didn't notice what was loose when I had it racked, and professional mechanics looking at it didn't find that problem. So the point I'm coming back around to make is, just because you take something to a garage to have it inspected doesn't mean they're going to actually find any problem or a problem with your vehicle that might or might not exist. It's one other thing you put in your arsenal to do, but you can't 100% rely on that, and you need to know that going in. You're never going to be 100% perfect when buying vehicles, but you want to stack the odds in your favor as much as you can to eliminate serious problems, and hopefully that's what these next videos coming out will help you to do. You break it, you bought it. Yeah, there you go. My conscience got me. As soon as I smacked that curb, I knew I was in trouble. So that's why that car became mine. And I kept it for a couple years, had it, was a weekend car, and one day a police officer followed me home in a rainstorm, and dude follows me for miles and different roads and different turns, and I'm thinking, man, what did I do to annoy this guy? I got home, and I got out of the car, and the guy rolls his car down. It's like, you want to sell your car? I'm like, yeah. So I shot him a price. He brought me a cashier's check the next day. So you just never know. All right, somebody hit me with a good question on buying vehicles, or something you've run into strange when you've been out looking at vehicles or buying vehicles. There's 3 Jens, Jeff, John. Yeah, Jeff just excuse me, Jeff just hit it. Two and a half times as much to rent a vehicle per day on average than what it was a few months ago. Son with a 5.5-inch ground clearance. Yeah, mechanics' crystal balls are often broken too. Yeah. And, I know some of these people talk about these pay services. Having some stranger write up a report on a vehicle that you hire to look at one in another city, I can tell you from experience with houses, people that do that with houses, in most areas, you don't have to have any qualifications whatsoever in order to start that business. And I am 99% certain it is the same way with vehicles in most areas. So if just because somebody has a business running around and they're charging $150 to go look at a vehicle for you and take a couple of pictures of it and say they tested a couple of things, which they may or may not do, that's taking a heck of a chance. I mean, it's better than nothing if you're buying an expensive vehicle from far away and going to have it shipped to you. But like I said, you or I or anybody else could start one of those businesses. It doesn't necessarily mean we're qualified to do it. And I've seen this with houses, man, that, there's some dude, all he does is run around and take some pictures, and they get the little $3 thing to check outlets with from the hardware store and stick it in each outlet, and they do a report on, you know, what worked and what didn't, and that's the extent that they're really doing. You know, they turn the water on and make sure a toilet flushes, and they're not getting in a, you know, they're not crawling under the houses, and they're not crawling into the attics and checking things. And that's just the way it is. You're paying for them a lot of times to write up a really nice report. And the same thing went on with people that appraise houses in a lot of areas. House appraisals in rural areas tend to be a little bit of a joke, but some of the banks sometimes require it, and you're paying a lot of money for somebody that's doing nothing but spending a couple hours writing you up a nice report. So take any of these car will inspect your vehicle services for you with a grain of salt. Toyota RV 91. What do I think about the age? It only has 51,000 miles. If that's one of those, is it one of the Delphin or Dolphin? Dolphin, I guess it was. I know that they made in the late 70s and through the 80s. Some of the early ones had problems with the rear end. The wheels weren't heavy duty enough, but by 91, that issue was corrected. So if you like the way it's made, it's certainly possible. But a 91 model vehicle, one thing to take into consideration is you're getting into an age when you're talking 30 years or older that you can start running into issues when you need parts that you're going to have to get off the secondary market or the used market, because those parts simply aren't available anymore. And sometimes that will even run as far as things like suspension parts. And I know that holds true with some of the full-size vans, different brands that, you know, they stopped supporting, the manufacturer stopped supporting that stuff years ago. So if you need a ball joint or this or that, or, you know, it may not be made by anyone anymore. So that's the only advice I have for you. But if you're getting it at the right price, then yeah. Dry rot of hoses and belts, yeah. Unless the person I'm buying from has maintenance records, or there's maintenance stuff showing up on the Carfax reports that I pull. There's a list of things I do when I buy a vehicle, and if those hoses and things would be one of them. If I don't have proof that it was done in the last few years, I assume it wasn't. That's the way I approach it. And I know I'm going to have to put a few $100s into the vehicle to have that done, and a PVC valve change for a few dollars, and a thermostat change for a few dollars, and just a lot of common parts, because I want to eliminate all those problems up front. And if it's easy to get to on a vehicle, you know, I may possibly go ahead and have a water pump changed. There's definitely some of that worth doing, but I would have the vehicle racked, and I would have the suspension looked at pretty closely just to see what kind of shape the bushings and things are in, and make sure that you can get them. That would be the thing. Make sure that they're available for those vehicles, because I'm not an expert on those things. I've not had to deal with those, and I don't know whether on that particular vehicle, whether those parts are still available or not. But I can tell you it's becoming an issue with some of the other brands when you get into stuff that old. So I hope that somewhat answers your question. Lemon Squad, do they really care to do a good job? Yeah. Yeah, this video coming up is going to help you, I am confident, be able to do a better inspection than those people are going to be able to do. But you still want to have a vehicle racked. And the main thing for racking a vehicle is just, I want to be able to see the bottom of the motor. You know, I want to be able to, even though there's some other things I'll tell you about as far as checking for leaks, but I just want to be able to see the condition of the other side. One thing is rust. There are some vehicles that are more prone to rust than others. Sometimes it depends on, you know, the area of the country they come from. If they come out of the Northeast or they come off the coast somewhere where they're eat up with salt. But you can get into some vehicles that the body looks fine and the frame is going to have serious problems. And you can run into issues where, you know, the motor mounts, the transmission mounts, different things can simply rust away. You can run into issues where the shocks, suspension parts connect to the frame can rust away. And at that point, you have an unsafe vehicle. You have a vehicle that's not fit to drive because you have parts that can break away at any time. And those are the things that the serious things I'm looking for when I put one on a rack. And in addition to that, I'm going to look at the condition of the exhaust and all of that stuff and just make sure that, or know if there's a problem before I buy it, and that's going to get factored into it. Heavy frame rust would absolutely keep me from buying one. The exhaust, the last 20 years or so on vehicles, exhausts generally aren't a problem. If you run into a problem with a rusted out exhaust on a newer vehicle, you're probably going to have rust issues throughout that vehicle. And you're probably going to have the potential to get into those frame issues and stuff again. So those are the basic things I'm looking at. And just having the mechanic be able to shake things and make sure there's nothing loose on that front suspension. And again, you know, you pay somebody $20, $50, whatever to do that for you. It's a small price to pay. And, you know, I don't mind the second set of eyes from the mechanic looking at it with me. You know, I always ask for their opinions and stuff, but because they may notice something that I don't, but I pretty much know what I'm looking for. But I absolutely have them racked before I buy them. Daughter had a Ford Expedition, bad wiring harness, had to jump because Ford no longer made the part. Yeah. And again, that's something, you know, it could have been gotten from a parts yard maybe, but when you're dealing with replacing wiring harnesses, electrical problems like that, if you're not doing it yourself, that's a lot of expense. And if you're trying to do it yourself, it's a lot of headache. So I hate that happened to her, but that is a good example of what can happen. Beware of vehicles that come from flooding areas. That's always potentially a problem. From coastal areas, again, because of hurricanes and stuff. But yeah, there's little telltale signs and things that you look for that I'm going to go over in these videos. But I guarantee the inspection you do yourself will be better than the inspection that you're going to pay somebody to do. And even if you think that you don't know anything about cars or enough about cars to do it, I guarantee you when I walk you through these next videos, you're going to be confident enough that you'll be able to do it. And you'll probably see some mistakes you made on other vehicles you bought in the past. Or mistakes that friends have made that have gone and bought vehicles sometimes that didn't do these things. Salvage vehicles after hurricanes, river floods. Yeah. Even vehicles that have been in accidents, there's a thing called skip titling. They've cracked down on this a little bit more, but it's still possible for this to happen, for a vehicle to get totaled. And it just gets sold 3 or 4 times from state to state to state until one of the states forgets to put on there that on the title that there was a problem with it. And now you have in that state a vehicle that's worth much more money. So those things do happen. I had a vehicle that was hit once, was in an accident. It was a lot of cosmetic damage. Wasn't one of these vans, by the way. Had a lot of cosmetic damage. The day the adjuster came out, it was raining, so the guy standing there with an umbrella and a computer with a strap around his neck. And I had waited to try to pry the door open and the hood open and stuff until he got there. And he's like, no, I can see this headlight lens is, it's busted the whole subframe and all this. He said, I'm just going to total it. And he did. Well, after he left, I pried everything open and looked at it, and it didn't have any frame damage. It was all cosmetic. And I bought the vehicle back and fixed it back. But my conversations was with these, this is the interesting part. My conversation, though, with the insurance company and with the adjuster, the insurance company place that I bought it back from, we were talking about, I was specifically asking about that. And it's like, oh yeah, in your state, since you're buying it back, we don't have to report it as totaled. And I thought, well, that's just awful. I can see a whole lot of people getting ripped off on a whole lot of vehicles if that's the official policy, and I don't know why a large insurance company would allow that to go on. And, I went and put cosmetic parts back on this vehicle, had it inspected, put back on the road, and it was fine. And I drove it into the ground. I knew after that I was going to keep it and just rack up the miles on it anyway. It was a work vehicle. So I wasn't going to be selling it to anybody anyway. But people do things they're not supposed to do sometimes. And everybody is not honest. This is the thing with private parties, dealerships, whatever. Everybody is not always honest. And I stopped and looked at a vehicle once that I wanted. I met the guy. If you had me bet money that this guy would have been the one to roll back the mileage on a vehicle, I wouldn't have believed it until I did the checks and found out that's exactly what happened. There was a huge mileage discrepancy, and it was done while he owned it. So had I not done those checks, had I not spent the whatever money for the Carfax and stuff and done my research, I'd have gotten shafted on that vehicle. And the amount of mileage that was rolled off that vehicle, a 4 or 5 year old vehicle, was enough to make about a $5,000 or $6,000 difference in what the vehicle was worth. So there are people that do those things. I had, again, back in the days of dealing with toy cars and sports cars, I had a sports car that I decided to change out all the dash stuff because there was another one that went in there that was made as an option that I liked better, had a higher mile per diameter speedometer, different things. But when I put that in, that threw the mileage off. And I dictated that everywhere. I had notes so the mileage would be accurate. And I sold it to someone that I knew who got it for his wife, and then they busted up. And shortly thereafter, I saw the wife had this car for sale, and she's advertising the mileage showing on that odometer, which wasn't the real mileage. It was a 30 or 40,000 mile difference. And I sent her a note, and this was on Facebook. I sent her a note and I said, hey, by the way, we all went over this when I sold this car to your husband, and we all had this in writing that the mileage on this car is not accurate. So for what you're advertising. And she rewarded me by blocking me, unfriending me and blocking me, and kept her ad up and sold that car to some unsuspecting person who didn't realize they were buying a car with 30,000 miles more than they thought it had on it. So you can take that little story for what it's worth, but those things happen all the time, and that's why as a buyer, you have to do your research. Tim, no service record doesn't necessarily mean a bad vehicle. Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people do their own maintenance and do it well and do everything on schedule. Don't forget to buy goat food. Yeah. All that, the goat thing will be revealed in the next month or two. Done, all maintenance done, including the timing belt. And there's a really good point right now. When you're getting into, especially with minivans, and I hit on this in some of the other videos I've done on different brands, but when you get into some of these minivans, and the same for you guys and gals just with cars and things you're driving right now, these Asian brands that use timing belts rather than timing chains, those things have to be changed at intervals, and it's expensive. If you're taking that thing into a garage and having it done, because so much of that motor, the front end of that motor has to basically come off in order to do that and get to that, you can easily get into $1,000 repair on that thing, or maintenance, having that belt changed out. And if you don't have it done, you're taking a chance on that belt breaking. And the way some of those motors are designed, if that timing belt breaks, that motor is destroyed. That's the end of it. So that's one of the things that you need to know if you're looking, especially in minivans or cars with these Asian brands that are a few years old. You need to know whether they have a timing chain or a timing belt. And the same thing, if you buy this thing from a dealership and it has 80,000 miles on it, and the timing belt was supposed to be changed at 60,000 miles, the dealership's not going to do that. They're not going to eat that. They're going to put that lot right on the car, and car right on the lot and sell it, or a van right on the lot and sell it. And then you're taking the chance on having a catastrophic engine failure somewhere down the road. So vehicles with timing chains, because timing chains generally will last the life of the vehicle compared to timing belts. But that's another thing you have to factor in. You know, if you've decided I want this certain vehicle, that if it wasn't done, that's the first thing you need to do when you buy it. And that needs to come off the price of the vehicle. Can I pay you to be a consultant? I'll be happy to pay you for your time. Oh. Well, I certainly appreciate that, but I'll tell you what, let me get these next couple of videos out this week, and I think that's going to go a long way toward helping you with what you need to look at, and have a real checklist of what you need to look at and how you do it. RV Lucky, how about a 7.3 diesel? I'm going to give you an honest answer. I know nothing about diesels. I have had 2 diesel vehicles in my life. They were both cars, and the last one I had was a little better than 20 years ago. I never had to deal with a lot of maintenance issues on them. You know, just oil changes. I didn't have problems with the ones I had. But I know there's some of these newer ones in trucks and things have had issues over the years. Oil changes are expensive, or much more expensive. I've talked to people who have some of these engines like the one you're talking about, and I know sometimes you take these things in and oil and filter change, they can get hit with like $250 on. So every time they have to have this done, some of the Mercedes stuff that was diesels. So the engines can certainly last longer, not require as much maintenance. But when they do, if you're the unlucky person that you do have to have it repaired, you're going to be paying some major bucks. So that's really all I can tell you about diesel engines. Again, I don't have the experience with this newer stuff. I just know what I've seen different friends have happen or have them go through. I personally don't think I would ever, because I'm more of a minivan guy, even though I have this larger camper van, I doubt I would ever buy a diesel like that, but you never know. But I don't think I would. Just because of the stories that I've heard and the repair bills I've seen other people have. Now, if I were a diesel mechanic and had any experience as a diesel mechanic, that might be a different story. Well, have I heard about state national parks? Do you think they're overcrowded with people with everything going on? Yes and no. The only national park I hit on this last trip I did was Hot Springs in Arkansas. It was hit and miss as far as what was open. I think it's hopefully is a little better now. It wasn't bad. They only have one campground, and that campground only holds about 30 people. And I was able to get a camp spot there. And then it has a little bit of an overflow area. I think your less popular parks are probably fine, but your more popular parks are going to be worse than ever right now. So if you're talking about, the Grand Canyon and Yellowstone and places like that, if you're going to the parks in Utah, you can forget about camping in the park. Any of those popular parks, it's just not going to happen. And it was like that before this spike in people that you have right now. So there's a whole lot of new people on the road that think they're just going to go and, hey, we're going to take off and go to the Grand Canyon and we'll camp in. They're going to be in for some hard lessons. They're going to learn about boondocking and spending the night without being plugged in to electricity real fast. You change the oil every 7,000 miles, okay, on the diesel. I've actually been helping somebody out in the family with another project, and I've been hauling a bunch of crap in my minivan. So once I've basically have all the stuff to do my little basic build, as soon as that project's over, here hopefully by the end of the month, I'll have that out and have that the way I want it. There's one thing I'm trying to sort out because I wanted to do this as a no build, and because of having a van with the stow and go seats, there's a part of that when those rear seats come out, something has to go in that place, basically. So I've got to do something, and I want to do it as simple as possible. Come up with a solution for it, and that may not make sense for what I'm talking about, but basically I'm going to have a hole that bed legs are going to be able to fall into without figuring out something to cover that up. So again, I want to be able to do that in a way that the average person can do it that doesn't have a lot of power tools and different things. I know I can go buy 3/4 inch sheet of plywood for $3,000 or whatever they sell for now. And, I have the tools and the ability to be able to cut something out and do that. But I'm trying to stick really no build with this thing, just so everybody else and new people coming in can easily see that this can be done. You know, you can put a van together and you can go across the country or anywhere you want to for long periods of time without having to build beds and shelves and all of these things. To the ones that want to do it and can do it, that's great. More power to them. I just don't. As far as what the next big trip is, where I'm going in it, summer of last year was supposed to be me in Canada a lot. That date is currently kicked back to July 21st, and I don't look for Canada and the United States to have their border open. I look for that to get kicked back yet again for at least a couple of months at a minimum. So I don't know that that's going to happen or not. If it happened, I would love to take off that direction. I have some relatives I would like to see. I have a few friends I would like to see in that area of where I would go that far north to go into Canada. And I just really don't want to make that trip and not be able to cross the border and spend some time in Canada if I'm going that far. So I keep trying to wait that out, but I'm assuming that's not going to happen. So therefore, my next trip will be either south or west, or it may just be hanging around in the more local area. There's a lot more of Kentucky I would like to do. I think I would like to hit Oklahoma and Kansas again in the fall. I would like to do Missouri, which I basically skipped on this last trip due to time constraints. I don't regret that. I had planned on doing a lot of that section of Route 66 through Missouri, and I spent so much time enjoying myself in the other two states and that was the right decision for me. I would rather do that and enjoy everything than rush just to start checking stuff off a list. Oh yeah, I've done this, I've done that, I've seen this, I've seen that. So I travel slower on these trips than I used to. When I hit some random town that I get a good vibe and meet a few people I like, I may stay there 2 or 3, 4 days instead of buzzing on through there to the next destination. So honest answer, next trip, really don't know. My thing is I basically pick a direction and I pick some destination 500 miles away and I start working toward that. And when I get to that and do whatever it is there, then I kind of take recommendations from other people and pick a direction and go on from there. So I don't plan entire trips out. I start with a basic ideal, which can change at any time. Last fall, pulled up to Devil's Tower in Wyoming. 25 vehicles waiting in line to enter, and new vehicles as fast as people enter it. Decided to go back another time. Yeah. I like Devil's Tower. I hung out there for 4 or 5 days. That was the end of my very first trip that I actually did before it. That was a trip that got me into doing the vans, because I did that trip in a car. I took a folding bicycle. That was my real introduction to everything, doing a 30-day trip and tent camping some, and I decided, man, I want to do more of this, but I need a better way to do it. And the hotels cost me a fortune, and I hated hotels anyway, most of them. And that's what got me into the van thing, was that trip. Devil's Tower in Wyoming, there's one campground in there that probably holds 30 people, 30 camp spots maybe. And there's one of those big corporate ones on the outside before you go in that probably has 150 spots. But yeah, I can understand turning around if it was that busy. So hopefully you will get to go back there another time, and it is enjoyable. And by the way, depending on when you go, you need to check this out, because there's a lot of rock climbing that goes on there. I don't know if you're into that or watching that or have anything to do with that, but there's a month in there, April, May, I don't remember. You'll have to look this up. That the Native Americans basically come and do their things there in that area. I happened to go right after they had been there, and I didn't know that before I went. And during that time, that month, there is no rock climbing. There's a lot of things there that you can't do because they are there doing their traditional things. So if you want to do Devil's Tower in Wyoming, check that out and make sure you're not conflicting the time of year when that stuff's going on. If the third row seats are removed in Odyssey, can they be reinstalled easily without ruining anything? Yeah, you're not going to ruin anything. As far as how easy, I haven't done it in a Honda Odyssey, so I don't know. They had there was some issues in the third row, and I don't want to scare you by saying this, so don't freak out. You can look this stuff up yourself. I believe it was the Honda Odysseys. I don't know what year. There were a couple of incidents where people died in those things. There was a horrible one, I think, in Ohio, where a teenage kid basically had this thing at school and went doing something after school and managed to reach over that back seat from the inside, trying to get down and get some sports equipment he needed out, and the whole seat flipped and caught him down in there, and he ended up unfortunately dying from it. So there's been a few of those things, and I think Honda probably changed some things after that, so to make that less likely that whole seat could flip when it was in the up position, to flip and be able to go back down in that cavity. And that may be on the newer ones, and this is speculation on my part, that may be on some of the newer ones why it's harder to get that seat in and out. There may be that extra spring or whatever to deal with. But again, if you just follow the instructions, you should be able to do it pretty easily. And worst case scenario, if you don't want to do it yourself, maybe because of the weight of the seat or whatever, go to a body shop. They should be able to do it in 20 or 30 minutes. It shouldn't cost you that much money to have them either take it out or have them put it back, if the time comes that you decide to have it put back. An automotive body shop should be able to do that. Yeah, another one, Canada's out. Don't count on Canada till the end of August. At the earlier end of September is realistic. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. And I don't even know that it'll happen before the end of the year, but I think that's going to be the earliest. And I have a buddy right now. As a matter of fact, I talked to him today because I finally got him on the move a couple of months ago, and he called me today to tell me he's supposed to have his passport in the next week. And, it's potential he would go on one of these trips with me where we would end up either, one of the U.S. borders. So we'll see what happens. But, this is a big country, man. There's plenty of places to go, and I'm sure anywhere in the country you are, there's places within 100 miles of you that you've never been to, that you could go stay or explore and enjoy. Doing things early in the day helps with national park visits. Yeah, I've heard that. If you can be there right at opening time. And the reason I have heard that is because that's not me. I tend to not be a morning person. So I'm the dude that's going to show up in the afternoon probably, or late in the evening, depending on what the temperature is doing. And figuring out how long in advance you can reserve campsites helps with the reservation success. Yeah, I don't do reservations. That doesn't suit my style of travel at all. To the ones that it works for, I'm happy for you. Because again, we're all different. There's no wrong answer. But for me, it just doesn't work. Because I just really don't know where I'm going to be from one time to the next. And I don't want to have a reservation tomorrow night somewhere, because I may find something in between that I want to hang out and do instead, or spend more time somewhere. And I don't want to be having to rush to that next place because I have a reservation. Because I've made that mistake early on, and sometimes you rush to that next place and you just don't enjoy it. And you're just sitting there looking at each other going, man, we should have, I wish we'd stayed back where we were at, because we were all having fun there. So, but everybody's got to make that decision and have those experiences for themselves. Videos are helpful. Watch the ones about the pros and cons for each make and model of minivan. I appreciate that, and I'm glad those videos helped you. That's why I put them out there. If you're new, I've got that whole series where I do most of the brands on minivans, which with each brand, which year to buy, which years to avoid, because some had, some years had transmission issues or whatever. I want to do that on the full-size vans, but it is just so much more complicated when you get into the full-size vans, because they've been made so long, and there's just so many options, even with the modern ones, even if you limit it to the stuff made in the last 20 years. So I've talked to some people and made a lot of notes, and the ones I've had and been in and have experience with. But that series of vans on full-size, series of videos on full-size vans will happen eventually, but that's been put off a little bit because they're just going to be so much more time intensive than doing it for the minivans was. But I'm glad you and some others have found those useful to you, and it steered you away from some of the bad ones. Do you ever have trouble finding a place to camp when you don't have a reservation? I never have reservations. Never. Zero. I absolutely just don't. So those of you with reservations, feel free to jump in there and answer her question. But I am so anti-reservation. I said I didn't expect to be able to get a camp spot when I was at Hot Springs National Park. After I got in there and saw how small it was, I was really surprised I was able to. But I was there in April, I guess it was April or May, I can't remember now. So before the worst of the mad rush. But I honestly wouldn't count on being able to get a camp spot at most, certainly national parks. They're official campgrounds. But yeah, I just wing it because I can always find a place to park. I've never not found a place to park or stop. It may not be what I want sometimes, but it's just never been an issue. I just roll with it. And you have to have some realistic expectations too, because, the trips I've taken, 30, 35, 37 days straight, whatever I've been out. I had a trip last year. I was going for 33 days or something, and I never paid a penny to camp, and that can happen sometimes. But on any trip, you need to expect that things are going to go wrong. You're going to have a few days or a few nights that things aren't going to go your way. You're not going to easily find a camp spot or whatever you have, but it doesn't matter if you have reservations. It doesn't matter the same way. If you saw that video a few months ago where I ended up at a Walmart one night, which I do from time to time, and the storm came and picked the shopping carts up and hurled them through the air into the side of the van. We went there because something we wanted to do in a state park in Arkansas wasn't open, and we started to drive back over to that campground, which had vacancies, and we just decided not to because it was going to be out of the way, wrong direction from what I thought I wanted to do the next day. Well, in the park we would have been in, a bunch of trees fell, and some of them hit some of the campers and damaged and, I don't know, possibly destroyed some. So, I was much better off being at that Walmart and having a couple of dents from the shopping carts, possibly, than I would have been had I been in that state park with all the trees falling everywhere. It's just part of doing this. Things can happen. So you've got to stay flexible, and the good days outweigh the bad days by far. So you just can't let the bad days or the occasional bad experience get to you. I see some of you are into some conversation with Canada. I'm going to stay out of it since I've spent a total of 1 day in Canada in my life up to this point. Well, I'm not an expert enough on. I read some and I have friends there, but I'm not an expert to get into that conversation. I'm doing a weekend camp trip. I want reservations. I'm just out slowly cruising around to go camping, any old place, then reservations are not important. Yeah, that works for you. That's all that matters. Like I said, we're all a little bit different in the way we look at these things. And that's basically what it is a lot of this is finding what works for you, finding what you're most comfortable with. And that includes things in a van build, and that also includes your style of travel, where you're going to be happy spending the night, what you're going to enjoy during the day is going to dictate how you're going to do that. There are people that are more than happy to go sit 7 days or 10 days somewhere and not move from that spot. I can't do that. That doesn't work for me, but it works for them and they enjoy it. It would drive me nuts, but they enjoy it. What I do probably would drive them nuts and they wouldn't enjoy it. So it's all finding the balance that works for each of us. I know people have different needs and expectations for comfort, but I don't get the appeal of a full-size van. I'd rather tow a trailer with a small vehicle and leave it behind occasionally. And I made that face because, yeah, that's an option. Some people do that. I have friends that, I have camped with friends for, 10 days at a time. A guy with a truck and a pull-behind trailer, and he's happy as a lamb in it. I'm the opposite. I wouldn't be. I don't want to drag anything behind me. I don't want to hook and unhook every day. Because for me and my style of getting out and adventuring, that's what I would be doing. I would have to hook and unhook and hook and unhook every day, and I just don't want to deal with that. I want things as simple for me as I can make them. But that's not the right answer for him. May or may not be the right answer for you or someone else. That's part of the balance of finding what works for each individual person. Yeah, I saw that video a week or so ago. I saw that too, that the tree fell on the camper and them cutting the slide out off and hauling that thing away. And yeah, that was absolutely horrible. But those things do happen. They certainly do happen. Not a lot, but they do happen and can happen anywhere. Conversion vans are able to stand up in it. Depends on your height. Most people can't stand up in a conversion van. If it's an older one, when you see like these older GMC conversion vans, and they have nice seats and stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can stand up in them. You may still be slightly hunched over, but can you do what you want to do or what you need to do inside of that particular vehicle? And my advice to you would just be find you an ad or find you a dealer that's got one of those sitting on the lot and go look at it and go see what the height is inside those things and see whether it's going to work for what you think you're going to be doing. For me, a minivan without a high top is fine. You know, my large van, again, it was professionally done and it has the high top and I can stand up in it because, again, it was professionally done, and it also has the floor in the middle dropped about 4 inches, which is why it has enough height to be able to stand up in. But I'm just as happy in the other van and not being able to stand up in it. But I understand some people have, you know, different problems, different issues, you know, where that may be more of a necessity. Yeah. A good bed, you'll see videos on the channel on those. The bed I have, the mattress I have, I'm more comfortable in the van than I am at home, and I have way more money in the mattress I have at home. Those little trifold mattresses I use in the van, they've never been an issue. I sleep very well when I'm on the road. Standing up for me isn't a necessity. It helps. It helps when you're in bad weather. If you just hit those places that are, you know, it's nice when you're just in some place that it's going to rain for 2 or 3 days, because you just don't have a lot of options to get out of your van and stand up otherwise when you're in, say, a minivan. But there are places you can pull into, you know, even if it's going through a town somewhere and pulling into a bay in a car wash, that then you can get out of your van and stand up and stretch and move some things around and do what you have to do. So it's certainly possible to do. Is there a way to put a high top in a regular van? You can put a high top on any van, but it's going to cost you some bucks. And whether it leaks or not and how well it's done by the company that does it is going to be another issue. If you're going to have a fiberglass roof, 6 or 8 inches put on there, you're probably in the $3,000 to $5,000 range, and that's why very few people do it. If you're dead set on that, and you have a van that's not a high top, you're better off selling it and buying one that is, rather than trying to convert one, I think, for the money. But that's my opinion, so you take that for what it's worth. Vans for this buying vans for the disabled, I noticed they were cheaper in price. It depends on probably your part of the country. My part of the country, they don't seem to be cheaper in price, but if you're seeing that they are in your area, that's fine. If you've got wheelchair lifts and things in the van you're looking at, my understanding is those things are pretty heavy. You can get into 600 and 700 pounds for all that mechanism to be able to do that. So you're going to need some help if you're going to take all those mechanisms and things out. Man, there's some people that's done that on, you know, I'm sure there's videos on YouTube that will cover that. But I don't have any experience with that. But if it's less money and it's been well taken care of, and usually vans like that have been well taken care of. The first person that bought that van and converted it has some buku money, because those wheelchair lifts and things aren't cheap. They are thousands. They are many thousands. And doing conversions like that on a van, so as they come down from that seller to the next buyer that bought it and things, generally those people are putting out some good money. They're the kind of people that take good care of maintenance wise. So you may run into a good deal on one. Most have a 4-inch drop where the handicap, where the wheelchair will go. Yeah, a drop floor, kind of like what Road Trek did with that converted van that I have to get that extra height. Have you seen any 10-foot box trucks? There's nobody I know personally that uses one for camping. I know some people that have them that they use for business stuff, moving stuff, whatever. As a matter of fact, I'm getting ready to borrow one from somebody for a project. But I don't have any experience with using one to camp in. I know there's people that do it, and I know there's people that do it really stealth and, don't have any windows in the back of that thing, and that ain't for me, man. But again, we're all different. To the ones that can pull that off, but you'll never see me doing that. And another reason I don't have any desire to have that kind of van, one is it's all heavy duty suspension parts and stuff. It's going to be much more expensive to work on. It's going to be much more expensive for maintenance, and the gas mileage obviously isn't very good because of the weight of those things. And I do some long trips, and the full size van I have gets 13 miles a gallon roughly because it's so big and so heavy. You're dealing with these giant box vans and different things, and especially older ones, you're going to do way less than that. So if you're doing any faraway traveling, you're going to be spending a lot of time at that gas pump. Saw some videos by an English fella that installs fold-up roofs on European Fords and VWs. Yeah, I don't know if there's anybody doing those necessarily kind of tops. It's an interesting concept, and I know Volkswagen, they have, I can't think of the name off the top of my head, the ones they actually sold here years ago that are so popular. But personally, I don't want a pop top at all. Maintenance issues, and I don't, the pop tops, then you're going to have the stuff made out of vinyl or whatever material, and I just want to keep things simpler than that. But for those that want that, more power to you. It's all fine. And rough ride in a 10-foot box truck. Yeah, I have been in those things. I have used, I have rented U-Hauls for different things, moving equipment from one warehouse to another over the years. And yeah, they're not, they weren't made for comfort. What do I think about the Honda Odyssey versus the Toyota Sienna? I'd buy a Toyota. And I've got videos on each channel. There's a lot of people out there I know that are happy with Hondas, and more power to them. And some years are really good, but they've had some significant transmission issues twice over the last 15 or so years. So pull up my video they're on those, and it will tell you, because I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't have those notes in front of me, which ones that you're going to want to stay away from if you do an Odyssey. That's not to say you'll ever have one of those problems, but there's a greater chance that you will have a problem if you buy one of those years with known issues. And I want to put the odds in my favor. So I can guarantee you, would I buy a Honda Odyssey? Yes. If the right deal comes along and I'm in need or one of a minivan upgrades at that time, would I buy one? Sure, I'd buy one. But I guarantee you, I won't touch one from one of those bad years, period, regardless of the cost, because I just don't want that extra chance of hassle in my life. And there's too many other good brands, good years brands that I can buy and not have that as a potential issue. But if I already had one, even if I already had one of the years that was a bad one, I hadn't had any problems with it yet, I wouldn't worry about it. Odds are, if you've taken care of your van, you'll probably never have that issue out of it. But I want the odds in my favor if I'm coming into this buying something. But I know I've had people that come in there and watched those videos and got mad at me and left me bad comments and unsubscribed and whatever. Well, you're saying this generation of this is bad. Well, I've had one and I put 150,000 miles on it and I never had any problem. Good for you, man, or good for you, lady. But that, just because you didn't have that problem doesn't mean all these other people aren't having problems out of it. These last couple of years of Dodge Grand Caravans and stuff that they've stuck these 4-cylinder engines in, they're having major oil consumption issues out of these things right now. And we're talking vans that were made in, 2018, 2019, probably 2020. There's just stuff that you stay away from. And certain engines in some brands that you stay away from. I've got a buddy that just bought it a year old, and I got to ride in it, and it's nice SUV kind of minivan hybrid thing, but it has a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine in it. I won't touch one of those. Flat out. And I don't want one. I wouldn't buy one new, or I wouldn't buy one a year old. I certainly would not buy one of those that was 6 or 8 or 10 years old, because pulling that much weight with a 4-cylinder is already asking a lot. You put a turbo behind it, and now you've got additional future maintenance issues that are really expensive, and you're putting more strain on that little motor. So Ford and General Motors and Chrysler and all these guys, they can say what they want to about these little. I know there's been a move in a lot of these vehicles, trucks, vans, whatever, to these 4-cylinder turbo engines. That's fine if you're buying it and it's under the manufacturer's warranty. But I think there's going to be some huge issues out of those things. And I think you're going to see much shorter engine life out of those things. I don't think when you have a Turbo 4, I don't think you're going to see 200,000 miles out of it. I think you're going to have a lot of people having problems at the 70 and 80,000 mile mark. So those vehicles I wouldn't touch. If you bought one, you like it, you haven't had any problems so far, more power to you. That's great. Take it, enjoy it. But I wouldn't buy one. Is there anything you can tell me about the Savannah conversion van? GMC Savannah, it's a full-size van. As far as the conversion part, every year was done different. I mean, the layout's basically the same. Every year things were done, different wood trim, different seat styles, that kind of stuff. So it's just finding one you like, and if you're going to pull all the seats out of it, then it really doesn't matter if you're going to pull all the seats out and use it for a camper. I will tell you that I have a good friend that has one of these full-size vans and got it, ripped it apart, including taking the ceiling out to do the van build, and he will very honest tell you that he's regretting what he did. You know, that he got caught up in this van build thing that he saw everybody else doing, and it just doesn't have to be done to take this thing down to the steel structure. And, you know, it's nice that people are doing it and it looks pretty and it really looks nice sitting in their driveway, but when they start bouncing through the woods, you know, I don't know how well some of that stuff's going to hold up 6 months and a year later. Time will tell. Turbos are great in a compact car like a WRX in sports cars. Yeah, I wouldn't want a 4,500 pound van. Yeah, and I was talking about that little 300ZX Nissan sports car from years ago that was made in the 90s. There was a version of it that was twin turbo. It had two small turbochargers instead of one large one. And I mean, it was just a wicked, wicked automobile for its time. And that was the first thing, there was no turbo lag on. I mean, you hit the gas and it went. So now, after all the turbo problems and all the years later, that's kind of what manufacturers have all come full circle, doing these smaller turbos to eliminate the turbo lag, and they're all bragging on their expected life of their turbochargers now, which may be true. Because turbochargers on older cars, I mean, that was the thing back then. You lose a turbocharger, you're out $1,000 or $1,500 to replace it. Same with these newer vehicles. They're bragging, oh, we've worked out all these issues that everybody had, and the turbochargers last longer now. Well, that may be true, but again, you're still putting a lot of stress on those four-cylinder engines, especially when you're talking truck weight and van weight. Even that turbocharged Nissan back in the day, it was a 6-cylinder, not a 4-cylinder. Have a 2016 Nissan Altima. How could I fix it to live in? Well, it's possible to do it. There's lots of YouTube people you'll find that do car camping. You know, you either fold a seat down or take the front seat out and put you a board in from the back seat to the front seat, and you may have to dangle your feet in the trunk or something depending on how tall you are. But you're asking a lot to squeeze into a car by the time you have some type of bathroom and shower and clothes and food and cooler and this and that. But it can certainly be done. It can certainly be done for a while, and then if you decide, hey, this is something I really like, this is something I really enjoy, then, you know, the first chance you get to go from that to at least a minivan is going to make a world of difference. But if you already have a car that you want to try it out in, try it out in. You know, it's not hard. Take a seat out, cut a board, throw a sleeping bag on it to start out with, mattress cot, and go try it out for a few nights somewhere and see what works for you and what doesn't. Somebody that has a Kia Soul, which is a fairly small vehicle, but yeah, there's a lot of people camp in those things. So it's certainly doable. And Lisa Johnson, if you've not done a lot of this before, this is the biggest mistake I'm seeing people make right now, man. They're jumping into this stuff because of the fascination with this Nomad Land video, on top of the fascination that was already put out there with van life stuff before this, and buying into this concept that they're going to go live in the middle of the desert on $200 a month. And People that have never done any of this before, and let me tell you something, I wasn't the world's most experienced camper when I started this stuff. Now, I was in the military years ago and did what I did in the military, and I had a few little camping trips with buddies and things over the years, but no, by no means was I some diehard person with doing this, or some diehard survivalist. But the point I was getting back to is there are people spending bukus of money doing this stuff with their car or their van or whatever. And some of it was because they got this stimulus money and it's, hey, free money, let's go try this. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's how they wanted to spend their money and stimulate the economy and get some enjoyment out of it. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of people that's out on the road right now that aren't enjoying this. That quite honestly, this wasn't for them. Or they've made this stuff way too complicated and they've sucked the joy out of what they're trying to do because they're trying to have this perfect home on wheels. And that's not what it's meant to be necessarily. It's not for me. I'm not trying to make a statement on society with what I do. I don't care what vehicle I'm in. It's just a way for me to get from point A to point B and do it comfortably and economically so I can stay out there exploring longer, exploring the things that I want to do. But I'm not in love with any of my vehicles. I'm not in love with the lifestyle, any of that stuff by any means. It's just I enjoy it more than I do going to hotels, and it's a whole lot cheaper. That's why I do it. But for me, it's all about the adventure. It's all about the exploration of the places that I go to and about the people I meet when in those towns and things when I'm out doing it. But people lose sight of that. They get too caught up in the van and the build and living in the van and spending all my time in the van and what do I, it's 112 degrees, man. You're not supposed to be in the van today. You're supposed to be out doing something. If you're trying to be in the van out west right now at 112, 114 degrees and you're trying to figure out how to stay in your van all day long, you're doing this wrong. And that statement will make some people upset. But you're doing it wrong. That's not what this was ever meant to be. You've bought into the wrong concept, and those people need to rethink what they're doing and why they're doing it and what they're trying to accomplish in their own life. Will I ever go full time? 50-50 chance. I have worked the last 3 years to set myself up and get into the position where I could do that potentially, and I am at that point now that I certainly could do that. I'm cleaning up the last of a few things and projects that I have going on this summer. Will I do it? I don't know. And if I do it, how long will I do it? I don't know. And that's an honest answer. I would like to do it, I think, for a while. I would like to go and work camp and just do some jobs, the types of jobs I have never done before. I would just like to experience different things in life. And it doesn't matter that maybe I could go over here and make more money. I don't care about that anymore because I've got the expenses down. I just want to experience other things now. And that includes other types of employment. Mine was a camper van, not a house residence van. Yeah. And I've missed a whole lot of comments sitting here talking. So in the last 10 minutes, if somebody asks a question, go ahead and put that question back in there again, because I may miss it trying to scroll around here a little bit. Only intend to remove the middle row seats to adapt that area to meet my road trip needs. Yeah. That can be done in some vehicles. The thing that annoys me in videos, and the thing that really annoys me in forums online is these people coming in there with the attitude that my way is the only way, and if you're doing anything else different, you're just wrong. I don't believe in that. There's too many people doing things too many different ways. And what's right for one person isn't necessarily right for the next person when it comes to van life or van bills or whatever. We're not all on the same path. We don't all have the same goals. And our goals can change sometimes from one year to the next. So it's a matter of learning from each other and just adapting to, what works for each one of us. Before I got my van emergency slip, the cross trek is doable. Challenge is getting enough ventilation, and that's the challenge in a lot of things, but certainly more so, I think, if you're trying to camp in a car or something or you may be trying to go a little more stealth and don't necessarily want people to know. And the first thing I do with any vehicle, if it doesn't already have them on, any vehicle, I go and buy the things that go around the windows, whatever they're called, the rain shields, rain guards, whatever, because that allows you automatically to crack a window an inch, inch and a half, not have to worry about it getting rained in. But also, people just walking by your vehicle can't tell that you have your window cracked that inch or so. So the first thing I do on any vehicle for years that I've gotten is I go and get a set of those and put those on. And certainly whatever van, minivan, camper van you're using, those of you using cars right now, I would get a set of those and stick those on there. Because it just makes it easier and makes you feel a little bit safer than just sitting there with having windows cracked all the time, that any fool that walks by can see that your windows are cracked and make it a little bit more of a target if they want to get in your vehicle. Yeah, Samantha made a good point too. If you're dealing with like class B's, they're not. She's in part of Tennessee. I'm in this Tennessee, Virginia, Kentucky kind of area. You don't have nowhere near the amount of these things that you have out west. That you're going to find for sale. There's about 10 reasons for that, I think, but it's certainly harder. And even though there's more in the West, though, they tend to sell for more in the West, from what I've seen. So a little bit of a trade-off there, but I think people are willing to pay a little more because they feel more confident if that van did come out of California or Arizona or something, that it's not had the rough winters that it may have had in the East, and the road salt and rust issues and those kind of things. So I think that's one of the big reasons they sell for more out on the West Coast. Yeah, we need to do a van safety video one day. I've actually had that on my mind for a while. But sometimes you don't. Give some tips for you ladies, some self-defense tips, but sometimes you don't want to put out there exactly everything you have for necessarily for security. Yeah, it's interesting seeing how the van sales are in different types of vans, how hard they are to find in different parts of the country. KW Quixable. I'm probably not saying that right, but I appreciate that. I'm glad you found that useful. Yeah, people get so caught up in the bills, and I see this all the time too. They're so caught up in what they're trying to do with their wood trim and stuff that they're missing out on the basics of what they need. You know, how to shower, how to cook, how to go to the bathroom. Uh, getting those basic things taken care of has become an afterthought to them because they're so caught up in the let's make it all out of wood and start traveling the country. And that's fine. They'll figure it out eventually. Especially the younger people. But I was young once. I didn't listen to anybody. I did everything the hard way. Plan to go to Dexter, Missouri. I have barely been into Missouri, except for being an Army base there years ago. I've barely crossed into Missouri a few times, so I've hit like corners. So hopefully somebody else here maybe can help you, but I can't help you with Missouri. I'm looking forward to getting to explore and spend some serious time in Missouri, but it hasn't happened yet. Class B in Illinois for 19,000. Yeah, if you're talking about a road trek, 19,000 will put you into a late 90s, early 2000s if you're lucky. Or it did. I don't, again, I haven't really kept up with the prices of those things here in the last 6 months to see how out of whack they may have gotten. Oh, my microphone's going out when I lean back too far. I apologize for that. Thanks for letting me know that. Hey, you're welcome. Glad you got to hang with us for a while. Dogs are great security regardless. Yeah. I don't travel with a dog at this point, an animal at this point. That's not to say that won't happen in the future. But certainly having a dog that barks can't hurt. Trying to catch up on a few comments here if you'll bear with me. I'm trying to figure out a way to get something that throws these comments over where I can see them instead of being tucked over here in a side box. I apologize for that. We're closing in on the 2 hour mark. Have you guys and gals haven't had enough, or do you want to try to go on with this for a little bit longer? I'll leave this up to you. If you want to try to go on for a few minutes longer, we certainly can. I see a couple people left. They've had enough. A couple people bailed as soon as I asked that question. A few minutes longer. Okay. Not sure if Kathleen's still in here or not. I see Samantha in here. I'm gonna put Samantha in charge of the class because I need a 2-minute break. And as you see that little number of people bounce up and down, or somebody comes in, let them know that, because they're going to be sitting here looking at a blank wall for the next couple of minutes. Let them know that I will be back. So you guys kind of talk amongst yourselves and come up with the next question you have, and I will be back in just a couple of minutes. All right, I am back, kind of. Give me another 2 minutes here to get situated and have the coffee put in the right place. And we'll see if we can keep this going a little while longer. A couple of you give me a good van buying a van question. All right. 5 people left because they didn't get to see my pretty face, but that's okay. All right. We catch up here. Jay Houghton was in Pigeon Forge. Was it good and busy when you were there? I bet it was. I bet Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge. Did you do Dollywood by chance? One second here. I'm trying to find a good fridge to answer your question there. I know some people have had good luck with the set power stuff, but I would avoid it at this point because they have some incoming voltage issues that can get flaky depending on what setup you're using. If you're plugged into your 12 volt, it's probably okay. If you're plugged into a battery pack, that's probably okay. But people that have any kind of solar setup, there's a bunch of extra stuff you have to do to make the set power thing work because it sees your battery as being in an over voltage state, and it just refuses to run. And that's not what I need out of a fridge. And if you have one of those and ever go to some kind of solar setup later, then you're potentially going to have that problem. So that's the reason I'd avoid the Set Power brand at this point. But like I said, I know people that have them and they don't have the solar setups of any type, so they don't have that problem. But I don't think that problem should be there to start with. I think that manufacturer should have tested that and worked that out a whole lot better than it becoming an issue after the fact, after they put those things on the market. So in that same price range, I would go with like Alpha Cool, which is the one I linked there. I'm sorry, I'll try to slow down the movements there. I'm all hopped up on coffee. I think this chair makes a little noise too. Yeah, any of those little USB fans will make a difference. As long as you have some air blowing on you at night, this time of year, it just makes a huge difference, even if it's some $10 or $15 fan. Try to lean back up here, be squeaking again. Lindy, everybody have a good weekend. You have a good weekend too. I got to get out a couple of days on a trip earlier this week, but I didn't film any of that. But a lot of shorter trips, more local trips, I tend to not do that. No, did not go to Dollywood. There's so much to do in Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg and that area. Dollywood certainly is not a necessity. I was in Orlando once and didn't do Disney or Universal or any of that stuff there, and I was there for a week. Well, it was just the wrong time of year. I think it was like August, and I wasn't going to fight the temperatures and all that hot concrete in amusement parks. Plenty of other things to do. Oh, bear sightings. Van buying question. Do you pay the price someone asked for a Craigslist or go under? That's a good question. I will. The gold minivan I had, I paid $1,800 for. And there were people that said, "Oh man, you overpaid for that van." Well, I had a complete history of that van. I knew everything that had been done to it. It was a one owner who sold it to a friend who bought it to resell. And the dude worked at a tire shop and put new tires on it and oil changes and did some other stuff. So yeah, had it not been for that, I'd have gotten that a little cheaper. And I could have beaten that guy down a little bit, but what was the point of that? You know, I just need it to be a fair deal. Any deal, both people should win. You know, I did a lot of business deals over the years. This thing of beating the other person into the ground tends to not work out well. But again, most people are going to ask for more than, you know, on Craigslist or whatever. If they've got it listed as 4,500, they're probably expecting 4,000. You know, if they've got it listed for $89.95, they're probably expecting 8,500. So that's your kind of baseline to start with. And then again, this is going to be based on, is there anything wrong with the vehicle that's not been disclosed, or we'll be nice and say the owner didn't recognize as being a future potential problem. Because then that stuff's going to come off there. And problems I'm probably going to walk away from. And if I catch you in a lie, I guarantee my price is going to come down. There's going to be a penalty for that lie, in addition to what it's going to cost me to fix that problem. Because I used to deal with some housing stuff, and I expect you to disclose everything because I'm going to inspect everything. You may as well tell me because I'm going to find out. You know, I'd rather you made it easy for me and told me up front, because when I find something that you didn't disclose, if you and I do business, there's going to be a penalty for your dishonesty. And that may make me sound like a not nice guy. You can take that for however you take it. Some people won't like that answer. But yeah, there's a penalty for dishonesty if you and I end up doing business. I don't go for that. I don't play that game with people when I'm the buyer standing there with money in hand. Yeah, in my area, knock on wood, the catalytic converters don't seem to be a big deal, but that's been going on for years, and it seems to be getting worse again. So, yeah, it's very hard to find a mechanic that will go check a car. Yeah, and you don't need that. Again, this is the next couple of videos I have are going to go over exactly everything I do, everything you need to have with you in order to do this stuff yourself. Because, and even when I go to a garage, when I take a vehicle to a garage, I have it put on a rack. There's things I already know what I'm looking for. So I'm not having the mechanic do it for me. I'm paying him for his time, and I'm paying for the use of his equipment. And I'm going to flip him $20 for lunch or $50 or whatever. And I don't mind having a second set of eyes as he walks under there and looks at it. But quite honestly, I don't need his opinion. I know what I'm looking for. You know, I have a checklist. I know the things that I'm looking for. And so that's really, that I think should be your mindset. You know, relying on someone else. And I don't know when you came in to chat, but we had this conversation earlier. And again, I used to go through this with houses. There's car buying services, just like there are car inspection services, just like there are for home inspections. And in most areas, there's no regulation for this stuff, which means you or I or your nephew Todd or whoever doesn't have to have any experience or be very good at it in order to start one of these businesses. They just have to be good at writing up a really professional looking, good looking report that makes it look like they were worth their $150 or $200 or $300 for a house inspection or whatever. Take a few pictures, check a couple of things, write a report. But it's far from anything I would ever rely on based on my experience with that stuff and the people doing it. But I'm a mechanic's daughter, so there you go. Also work loss prevention. So you see, there you go. You have some advantages there, Samantha. Hello, Adrian, new to the channel. Great advice all over. All right, I appreciate that, and I think you'll find some good stuff in the videos I've done, and also the next videos I do, which are going to involve buying a vehicle, and wish I could give you the money to buy an RV. Well, hopefully the stuff I have coming out here in the next week or so, it'll help you with buying it. It'll help you know what to look for and which ones to walk away from. Which, there's problems that are easily fixable, and there's problems that you just don't want to deal with. And as long as you know the difference in the two, you'll be okay. But yeah, and see, the thing when we're all young is we're all taught, go back to some of these inspection services or hiring a mechanic. I know some good mechanics, and I know some really lousy mechanics. I know some really lousy mechanics that have, they've had their own business for decades. I don't know how, but they've managed to keep it going. And there's just not a lot of regulation for these inspection services. That's part of the problem. It's basically salesmanship, and that goes on everywhere. I mean, there's places that house appraisals are worthless. There are areas in the United States where being the county coroner is an elected job, which means you don't have to have any training at all. And all of a sudden, you're the person that gets to go pronounce people, whether it was an accidental death or a murder or whatever, at a crime scene, and that can mess things up for future things the police have to do and prosecutions. And why stuff like that still is allowed to go on in some states is beyond me. There's areas where the building inspector, you think the building inspector, that person has to have some qualifications. Well, there are places where anybody can be the building inspector. And then there's a test they have to take and pass, but they have a year to take that test and pass it. And if they can't pass it, then they can no longer be building inspector, and the county goes and finds somebody else to do that job. As insane as that sounds, that's the way it works. So we see people in some of these positions sometimes, and we think they're well qualified to do these jobs, and that's just not always the case. So you need to remember that also with cars and vans and shopping for vehicles. I test drove a Class B plus. Guy really didn't know his transmission was about to go. He pulled the ad after okay, yeah, there you go. Which on that vehicle would have been $3,000 $3,000, I would say, to have that transmission redone or replaced, minimum. Gene Jones, used minivan prices way up this year. They are up on all vehicles right now. Pretty much, it doesn't matter what it is. Yeah, we were discussing that earlier, why the prices are so out of whack, and there's a bunch of reasons. Computer chip shortages, steel shortages, things that are affecting the used market that just rolls on down through the used market. This Nomad, how many of you have watched this Nomadland movie? And if you have, what did you think of it? I would really like to hear I would like to hear your opinions of this if you have watched this. But yeah, these prices, they're going to stabilize. They're going to come back to normal, but I think it's going to be 3 to 6 months before they do. But there's still some deals out there, but they are harder to find right now. Emily Journey, haven't watched it. But that movie, Good, Bad, or Indifferent, has brought, in the last 3 or 4 months, whatever it has been out, it has brought a lot of people into having interest in van life, and a lot of those people have jumped and bought vans and trying to get out and doing this, and it's going to be a disaster for a lot of them. They trying to have no experience and jump into this thing full time with no money is not a good, and take off and be thousands of miles from home is pretty much a recipe for disaster. And there's a lot of people doing that right now. And I've met a few on the road that have had some real horror stories. Well, not the way you want to handle things. Samantha's not seen the movie. Yeah, salespeople, even on new cars, they aren't real valuable sometimes. Yeah. Neither are real estate agents with houses. I hope none of you are real estate agents. And if you happen to be, I'm going to assume you're one of the good ones, because there are some good ones. There are some helpful ones. But the majority of them, unfortunately, aren't. Before this movie, I started camping in my car because I needed to see my family, but I couldn't go inside their house. Okay. Movie came out and I was disappointed. Disappointed to find out there's a whole thing going on out there. Yeah. Okay. Very cool, because now I know there's people you can meet and camp and see places. Yeah. Yeah, if you're doing this long distances, man, you've got to have an emergency fund, and you need it to be big enough to handle that worst case scenario. And that worst case scenario is generally going to be losing a transmission. So, in which case you're in the $3,000 range for a repair. If it's a vehicle that you're going to have repaired, and you're going to have downtime, because if you end up having to have a transmission repaired or replaced, you may as well factor in 2 weeks. You may get lucky and it's done faster than that, but you need to factor in 2 weeks. So you're going to have to be somewhere for 2 weeks, and you're going to have those expenses and things. That's the worst case scenario. Or you drive a less expensive vehicle like the old minivans I have, and I know in the back of my head that that's always possible to have a transmission failure, but minivans are so prevalent that I can just junk the thing and go buy another one and throw my stuff into it, because I don't have that fancy expensive, overblown, taking 4 weeks to do van build. I can easily take my stuff out of one minivan, put into another, and continue right on down the highway. But you have to have something as a backup plan if you're going to be doing this 1,000 miles or more from home. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people running around out there right now. There always have been, but there's more running around right now that just don't have a plan and just hoping that nothing goes wrong. And you have one of these gurus that just preaches to everybody, no matter how bad your life is, whatever problems you have, get in your vehicle and come live in the desert on free government land. You're about to be evicted, whatever your problems are, yada, 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 just make your way to the desert and you can do this, you can live here and do this cheap. Well, you can, but you're probably not going to be happy. Those people haven't spent a lot of time in the desert. And if they get out there and still don't have a way to have an income, a decent income and make money, most of them aren't going to be happy people. So I have a severe difference of opinion with some of the more popular people pushing the van life thing, because I have met the people that got out and have nothing to turn to and have no money, and the things went wrong and they're stuck wherever they're at. I've watched it, was very grim. More like a struggle for the way down the edge of being totally destitute. Yeah, and people are missing that point of the movie, man. They're and that is, but they're all caught up in the, well, whatever's going on in my life is bad, and I can just take off in the van and start this new life with no money, and or I'll pick up some jobs on the road, and there are some things you can do. But let me tell you something. First of all, not everybody's going to be able to go work at those jobs for a couple months in, say, an Amazon warehouse. They're not going to physically be able to do it. Or you've got a certain percentage of society that, I hate to say, is kind of lazy. People, they've never worked a strenuous job. These places like this, they don't put up with you not working. If you're there, you're going to work, and it's going to be physically demanding. The same thing with the people that do the thing in North Dakota, the harvest and different thing. So there are people that can go and pull those things off and work 3 or 4 of those month or 2 jobs during the year and make enough money to survive on the rest of the year. But it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And like I said, a lot of them, they just aren't physically going to be able to do it. I just want to see the USA and come home. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And the grass is always greener on the other side, but always remember, there's stuff within 100 and 200 miles of every one of you, myself included, that I guarantee we have never done. We have never gone and experienced and hung out at. And, me being all the way over here towards the East Coast, and, I'm drawn to those other places far, far, far away too. Make a plan for retirement, having a cabin built. Then I'll take the road a few months at a time. Yeah. And you have a plan, and that's the important thing. You have a plan, you have a goal, and you work towards making that happen. But man, there's just so many people that are on the road right now that they don't have a plan. They don't have a plan past this week. And You can get by without it for a while. You can get by with that until you have a breakdown that you can't afford to fix. Then you're in trouble. Thanks for live chat. 10:30 your bedtime. There you go. Good night, Samantha. Glad you got to hang out with us all this time. Hopefully we'll get to do this again soon. Jay Hyten, Simply Me Journey. Yeah, it's nice to have a few new faces in here kind of tonight. And Leslie, and then Vaughn, and a bunch of you guys and gals that I know and have gotten to talk to before. But since we're at about the 2.5 hour mark, I think we're going to cut this short, because if I go any longer, I'll probably start losing my voice anyway. Yeah, full-time van life is not for you, and that's fine. You know, it hasn't been for me up to this point either. You know, because of the responsibilities and the things that I had. But it's been great being able to travel more and more and more each year that I wasn't able to do before. In Florida since '88, I've never been in the Keys. Yeah, like Leslie said, you could spend the next few years just exploring your state. That's true, depending on, you know, there's some huge states, and, you know, even like Tennessee and Kentucky, much less something the size of Texas, you know, that you can spend a lot of time in and go slow and meet people and hang out in different towns. And yeah, absolutely. So yeah, do what you're able to do and do what makes you happy, whatever form of travel or adventure does it for you. What a lot of people are doing is changing location, living in a van. That's a really good point. Yeah, I've met some doing that, and I've met some with buku money in an RV doing the same thing. And I don't know with what they do. I don't know what enjoyment they get out of it. But to each their own. But with that said, I think we'll call this thing a night. I'll have a couple new videos up this week. Hopefully you guys and gals will find useful. And I never know in advance when I'm going to have time to do one of these live streams, but we got to do one last week. We've got to do this one, so hopefully it won't be too long before we get together and do this again. So everybody have a good night.